Hey guys, tonight we are going to journey into one of the darkest and most destructive periods in European history. We are heading into the heart of 17th century Germany, into the midst of the great, grinding chaos of the 30 Years' War. We are going to explore a subject that is often overlooked in the grand histories of kings and battles. We're going to look at the grim, practical, and terrible truth of what happens when death becomes a matter of industrial-scale logistics. You are about to become a man whose job it is to clean up after the horrors of war and pestilence, and you will witness firsthand the miserable reality of mass graves. Now for our little reality check. We have a modern image of a grave as a peaceful, individual plot, a place of quiet remembrance. But for much of human history, that was a luxury. When death came on a wholesale basis, whether from a great battle, a devastating plague, or a terrible famine, the solemn rites of individual burial were one of the first casualties. The burial becomes a grim matter of public sanitation, and the grave becomes a simple, terrible equation of volume and necessity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is what allows us to dig into these darker corners of the past, and, as always, I love to see where you're joining from. So please post your city and your local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story begins in a river of mud, men, and misery. You are 15 years old, and your world is the baggage train of a great mercenary army, slashing its way across the war-torn German countryside. Your village was burned to the ground 6 months ago. Your family scattered or killed, you having nowhere else to go. Simply follow the army that destroyed your home. It is a brutal, chaotic, and mobile city of 20,000 soldiers Germans, Swedes, Scots, Spaniards, and an equal number of camp followers. It is the only world you have left. You are an orphan, and you survive by your wits and a strong stomach. This latter quality gets you noticed by the army's chief surgeon, a weary, cynical, and often drunk man named Master Elias. He is a barber surgeon, not a learned physician, a craftsman whose trade is the brutal, practical art of battlefield medicine. He sees the steadiness in your hands and the lack of fear in your eyes, and he takes you on as his apprentice. You've joined a mercenary army as a surgeon's apprentice. Your main duties include holding down screaming men, heating up metal in a fire, and trying not to faint. The pay is terrible, but you get to travel. Your new home is the surgeon's tent, a grimy canvas affair that smells of old blood, wine, and the herbal poultices he uses to pack wounds. Your life becomes a brutal education in the realities of 17th century medicine. Master Elias teaches you his craft. You learn to hold a man down as Elias saws through a shattered leg bone with a terrifying, serrated knife. You learn to heat the cauterizing irons in the brazier until they glow red, to be pressed against a stump to stop the bleeding. You learn to mix foul-smelling poultices of herbs and moldy bread, which Elias insists helps to prevent putrefaction. Your master's primary medical philosophy is simple if a limb is wounded. You cut it off. It's a very effective treatment for stopping the bleeding, and it has the added benefit of also stopping the complaining. But you quickly learn that Master Elias's work with the knife is only the beginning of the battle. More men die in the weeks following their injuries than die on the field itself. They die of the fevers that inevitably set in, of the gangrene that turns their wounds black and stinking. Death is a constant, mundane presence in your tent, and with death comes your other, quieter duty, burying them. There are no priests here for the common mercenary, no consecrated ground. The army is always on the move. When one of your patients dies, it is your job to dispose of the body. You and another camp boy will wrap the corpse in its own dirty blanket. Carry it to a designated spot in a ditch outside the camp, and dig a shallow, unmarked hole. It is a simple, unsentimental act of sanitation. done to prevent the spread of more disease. You learn about the great debates of your time without ever setting foot in a university. Future historians will debate the true scale of the war's casualties, arguing that far more died of disease and starvation than in battle. You see this truth every day, for every man brought to your tent with a clean sword wound. You see tens suffering from the bloody flux dysentery or the burning fevers of typhus that sweep through the crowded, unsanitary camp. Your life is governed by the unceasing attrition of sickness. You become accustomed to this retail business of death. You have buried a dozen men, each in their own lonely, shallow grave. You think you understand your trade. You think you have seen what death is. One evening, as you are cleaning his instruments, Master Elias, deep in his cups, looks at you with his weary, bloodshot eyes. You've done well. Boy, he slurs, you have a strong stomach. You have buried the sick without flinching. He takes a long drink of wine. But you have only been burying the fallen leaves. You have not yet seen the forest when it burns. He tells you that the army is marching to meet a great enemy force. A major battle is coming, the first of your time with the army. You have only buried the sick, he repeats, his voice a low growl. You have not yet had to bury an army. The next day. The mood in the camp shifts. There is a new energy, a sharp, metallic tension in the air. The soldiers are cleaning their muskets, sharpening their pikes and swords. The casual camp brawls cease, replaced by a focused, grim purpose. You march for 2 days, and on the third morning, you crest a small hill and see it. On the plain below, the enemy army is arrayed, a vast and terrifying mirror of your own. You see the endless rows of pikemen, the blocks of musketeers, the banners flapping in the wind. Your own army begins to deploy, the officers shouting commands, the drums beating out the rhythm of the march. Master Elias sets up his tent in the rear, near the baggage train. He lays out his saws, his probes, his cauterizing irons. Like a butcher preparing his shop for a busy day's work, you stand at the opening of the surgeon's tent, watching the two great armies prepare to collide. You feel a profound sense of dread, but also a strange, terrible excitement. You have become accustomed to the quiet, individual deaths in your tent. You are about to witness death on a scale you cannot yet imagine. And you know, with a cold certainty, that the grim work of your shovel is about to begin in earnest. The battle is a storm of sound and fury that lasts for 6 hellish hours. From your vantage point in the surgeon's tent in the rear, you experience it not as a clash of glorious banners, but as an overwhelming tide of human suffering. The battle is still raging when the first of the wounded arrive, brought back on crude stretchers or staggering on their own. Their faces masks of shock and pain. Your education in the retail business of death is over. Today, you are learning the wholesale trade. The surgeon's tent becomes a butcher's shop. For hours, you do not stop. You hold down screaming men as Master Elias. His arms slick with blood to the elbows, saws through shattered limbs. You fetch water, you tear linen for bandages, you heat the cauterizing irons in the brazier until they glow cherry red, and you try not to breathe in the sickening smell of burning flesh as Elias seals an amputation. You see more of the inside of the human body than you ever wished to. Your hands, your clothes, your very soul feels stained with blood. By evening, the sounds of battle have died down. Your army has been victorious. They have held the field. But the cost is staggering. The tide of wounded men slows to a trickle. And now, the next phase of your work begins. Master Elias, having finished his grim work on the living, turns his attention to the dead. The commander wants the field cleared by morning, he says, his voice a weary rasp as he cleans his saw. The army marches at dawn. The dead do not march with us. You will be on the burial detail. You are sent out onto the battlefield with a group of other camp followers and soldiers who are not too badly wounded. As you walk onto the field, the last light of dusk illuminates a scene of unimaginable horror. The ground is a churned-up morass of mud and blood, littered with the dead and the dying. The bodies lie where they fell, twisted into unnatural shapes. The air is filled with the low, constant moaning of the men the surgeons could not reach. A sound you know will soon fall silent. The work begins. It is a grim harvest. Under the cold light of the moon, you move from body to body. The first thing that happens is the stripping. Soldiers move through the dead of their own side, taking anything of value: good leather boots, a warm cloak, a belt, a small purse of coins. It is not seen as theft. It is the practical inheritance of the battlefield. The dead have no more use for these things. Clearing the battlefield is a two-step process. First, you loot your dead comrades for their boots and any spare coins. Then, you throw them in a hole. It's a very practical and efficient way to mourn. Then your work begins. You and the others load the bodies onto carts. They are heavy, inert sacks of meat. There is no dignity here. You grab a leg, an arm, and you heave. You see the faces of men you marched with, men you shared bread with just yesterday. Now, they are just cargo. The commander, a pragmatic man, has given a simple order. There will be no individual graves. There is no time, no space, no energy. The enemy dead will be left for the wolves and the crows. Your own dead will be given a single common grave, a soldier's pit. A large detail of men is already at work with shovels and pickaxes, digging a grate. Long trench at the edge of the field. It is not a grave. It is an excavation. You watch them work, and then you join them. Your own shovel moving with a grim, mechanical rhythm. When the pit is deep enough, the carts are brought to its edge, and the burial begins. The bodies are not lowered on ropes. The carts are simply tipped, their contents tumbling into the darkness of the trench with a series of soft, heavy thuds. There are no shrouds. There are no prayers. There is no priest. There is only the grim, efficient disposal of the dead. You watch as the first layer of men, your comrades, fills the bottom of the pit. They lie in a tangled heap, their limbs intertwined, a macabre tableau of what was once a disciplined regiment. You stand at the edge of the pit, your heart a cold, heavy stone in your chest. You had thought the lonely burials of the sick back at the camp were grim, but at least those men had a hole to themselves. This is something else entirely. This is an erasure. 100 men, 100 stories, 100 lives, all reduced to a single anonymous pile of flesh. You do notice, however, that a small separate group is working nearby, digging a few smaller individual graves. Here, the bodies of 2 captains and a nobleman who fought with the army are being laid to rest in simple wooden coffins, with a priest saying the proper words, even here, in this democracy of death. The aristocracy finds a way to be buried in a better neighborhood. As you stand there, numb with horror, a soldier next to you, a man whose face is a mask of weary indifference, sees your expression. First big battle, lad. He asks, you nod. He spits on the ground. You get used to it, he says. Though his own eyes tell a different story. You see both ends of the spectrum that future historians will debate. You see the brutalizing, numbing effect of this work in the hardened faces of the veteran soldiers. But you also see a young man, no older than yourself, quietly slip a small wooden carving from the hand of a dead friend before the body is thrown into the cart. A small, secret act of remembrance. That night, back in the camp, you cannot eat. The image of the pit, of the tangled bodies, is burned into your mind. You find Master Elias sitting by a fire, drinking heavily, So he says, not looking at you, "You have seen it. It is a butcher's work." You whisper, "Aye," he says, taking a long pull from his wine flask. "That it is. And we are the butchers. This is war. Boy, it is a great and terrible machine for turning living men into dead meat. And when the machine is done with them, they must be cleared away to make room for the next batch. There is no glory in it. There is no honor. There is only the work. And the digging. Get used to it. The next morning, the army marches away. The camp is struck. The fires are put out. You look back at the battlefield one last time. All that is left to mark the great victory is a vast, fresh scar of raw, brown earth, the soldier's pit. You know that hundreds of men lie beneath it, their names and their stories already forgotten. Their only monument a patch of churned-up mud. You have now learned the first and most terrible truth about mass graves. They are not about death. They are about logistics. They are a practical, brutal solution to the problem of victory. And as you march on, into the heart of this endless, bloody war, you know with a cold certainty that this will not be the last such pit you will help to dig. The army does not march on. The victorious campaign season gives way to the brutal, frozen stasis of a German winter. Your mercenary army, a great hungry beast, settles into its winter quarters, occupying a walled city that it had conquered a few months prior. The relationship between your victorious soldiers and the defeated townspeople is one of sullen, resentful silence. You are not their protectors. You are their conquerors. A plague of locusts in woolen coats and steel helmets, consuming their food, drinking their wine, and filling their streets with your rough, foreign clamor. The winter is hard. The food stores dwindle. The city, already crowded, is now swollen with thousands of soldiers and camp followers. The narrow, filthy streets, where people live crammed together in tall, timber-framed houses, become a tinderbox, waiting for a spark. That spark comes not as a flame, but as a fever. It begins in the poorest quarter of the city, where the soldiers are billeted in the most crowded conditions. It is a sickness they call war fever or camp fever. We would call it typhus. It is a disease born of filth, of lice, of people packed together in unsanitary conditions. It starts with a headache and a high fever, then a rash of dark spots, and then a descent into delirium and death. Your work in the surgeon's tent, which had been quiet since the great battle, now begins again. But this is a new kind of war. You are no longer dealing with the clean, honest wounds of a sword or a musket ball. You are now faced with the slow, inexorable, and invisible violence of disease. Master Elias is a man out of his element, and his frustration makes him even more sour. I am a surgeon, not a physician. He grumbles as he looks at another feverish, dying soldier. I am a craftsman of the body. I can remove a shattered limb. I can pull a lead ball from a man's shoulder. I cannot cut a fever out of a man's blood. He can do nothing but offer cool cloths and bleed the patients. A futile gesture that only weakens them further. At first, the sickness is confined to the army, but it soon breaches the invisible wall between the soldiers and the townspeople. It begins to spread through the civilian population like a dark fire. And now, your grim expertise is called upon for a new and terrible purpose. The city's own civic structures for dealing with death collapse almost overnight. Their priests and their gravediggers die just as quickly as the common folk. The small churchyard inside the city walls, which had served the town for centuries, is filled to capacity in a single, horrifying month. The dead begin to pile up in the houses. The army commander, a man concerned not with piety but with the potential for the disease to burn through his entire army, takes control. He declares that all the dead, soldier and civilian alike, will be buried outside the walls. He orders a new, great pit to be dug, and he puts Master Elias, and by extension, you, in charge of overseeing this new, grim enterprise. Your expertise in digging mass graves for soldiers has now been recognized. You've been promoted to overseeing the mass grave for the civilians. It's a lateral move in the business of misery, and so you stand, once again, at the edge of a great open wound in the earth. But this time, it is different. The soldier's pit you dug after the battle was a thing of grim, military pragmatism. You were burying soldiers, men who had signed up for a life of violence and the risk of death. It was a brutal but understandable part of your world. This is a different kind of horror. The death carts that now rumble out of the city gates are not just filled with the bodies of anonymous mercenaries. They are filled with the people of the city. They are filled with families. You watch as a cart unloads its terrible cargo. You see the body of a baker, a man whose shop you had passed 100 times. Beside him is his wife, and beside her are the two small, shrouded forms of their children. The plague does not distinguish between ages. It takes them all. You see a young man, his face a mask of utter desolation, carrying the body of his own father to the pit, because he has no money to pay for a cart. He stands at the edge, weeping, before gently rolling the body in. The citizens are horrified, not just by the deaths, but by this form of burial. It is an assault on their every tradition, on their every belief. They are being denied a Christian burial by Christian soldiers. Their loved ones are being tossed into an unconsecrated hole, without a priest, without a prayer, without a name. To be mixed in with the bodies of foreign mercenaries and heretics, it is the ultimate humiliation. You witness a woman plead with one of the guards, begging him to allow her to place a small wooden cross on the body of her husband before he is covered with earth. The guard, his own face numb with fear of the disease, shoves her roughly away. Your own professional numbness, the hard shell you built for yourself on the battlefield, begins to crack. To bury an enemy soldier is one thing. To bury a child is another. This is not the neat and tidy disposal of the casualties of war. This is the destruction of a community, of families, of a way of life. In a small, secret act of defiance, you begin to say your own quiet prayers when the guards are not looking. You make the sign of the cross over the tangled bodies in the pit. You help an old man place his wife's body a little more gently than the others. They are small, useless gestures, but they are all the humanity you have left to offer. The great pit fills at a terrifying rate. By the time the first thaws of spring arrive, it is full, it is sealed with a final layer of earth. A great, unmarked mound outside the city walls. A silent monument to the terrible winter the city has just endured. As the weather warms, the army prepares to march again. The sickness, having burned through much of its fuel, begins to recede. The city has survived, but it is a ghost of its former self. You stand at the edge of the now grass-covered plague grave on the morning the army is set to leave. You look at the peaceful-looking mound, and you know that beneath it lies a compressed nightmare of 1,000 untold stories. You have learned a new and more terrible truth about mass graves. The soldier's pit was a necessity of war, but this, the civilian plague pit, was something else. It was a grave born of conquest and contempt, a final act of desecration upon a defeated people. It was not just a burial, it was an atrocity. The army marches on as spring breathes a fragile, green life back into the devastated German countryside. The memory of the winter plague pit fades, replaced by the familiar, grim routines of the campaign, the endless marching, the foraging for food, and the constant, low-level skirmishes. Your work in the surgeon's tent returns to what Master Elias considers normality. You are once again dealing with the wounds of war, the clean slice of a sword, the ragged tear of a pike, the small, dark hole of a musket ball. You are marching through a contested territory, a patchwork of Catholic and Protestant towns. Your army, fighting for the Catholic Emperor, is an instrument of his faith as well as his power. The war is not just for land, it is a war for souls. And you are about to learn what happens to the souls of those deemed to be on the wrong side. Your army lays siege to a small, fortified town that has been a stubborn bastion of the Protestant heresy. The town resists fiercely for a week, but it is a hopeless cause. The walls are breached, and the commander, a man known for his ruthless piety, unleashes his soldiers. You and Master Elias remain in the camp. As is your custom during a battle, you do not see the sack of the town, but you hear it. The sounds of fighting are quickly replaced by other, more terrible sounds: the screams of the dying, the roar of fires, the triumphant shouts of the soldiers. By evening, the town is silent. You are brought in with the rest of the camp followers to find a scene of utter destruction. This was not a battle, it was a massacre. The soldiers, fueled by religious fury and a lust for plunder, have slaughtered a great many of the town's inhabitants. Your work is to tend to the few wounded among your own soldiers. But as you do, you see the true horror. The bodies of the townspeople, men, women, and children lie in the streets where they were cut down. The army's fanatical chaplain, a thin, severe man with eyes that burn with a cold fire, walks through the fallen town. He declares that these people were not soldiers, they were heretics. They died outside the grace of the one true church. Therefore, they are to be denied a Christian burial. To bury a heretic in consecrated ground is to invite the devil to nest among the sheep of Christ. He proclaims to the assembled soldiers, "Their bodies are unclean, their souls are damned. They shall be disposed of as the filth they are." The commander gives the order. A burial detail is formed. But this is not like the respectful, if pragmatic, burial of your own fallen soldiers after the great battle. This is an act of posthumous punishment, a final, brutal statement of theological victory. There is no great pit dug with care. The soldiers find a natural ravine, a ditch at the edge of the town used for refuse. And this is to be the heretic's grave. You are commanded to oversee the disposal, to ensure it is done quickly and efficiently. And you are forced to witness acts of profound desecration. The bodies of the slain townspeople are not carried. They are dragged by their feet through the mud, their clothes torn, their faces scraping on the stones. They are stripped of any remaining valuables, and then their naked bodies are thrown into the ditch like so much garbage. The bodies of men and women are piled atop the bodies of their children, a tangled, obscene mass of flesh, when all the bodies have been thrown into the ditch. The chaplain performs his final, terrible rite. He stands at the edge of the pit, raises a crucifix not in blessing, but in condemnation, and he performs a ritual of malediction. As these bodies are cast out from the sight of God's holy church, he chants, his voice ringing with a terrible righteous fury. So too are their souls cast out from all hope of his mercy. May they find no rest. May their spirits wander in the darkness. May their names be erased for all time. It is a curse, a formal religious damning of the dead. Master Elias stands beside you, his face a mask of cynical indifference. "Listen to him, boy," he mutters to you, his voice thick with wine. "Cursing the dead, he's as much a magician as any village witch. But he has a fancier hat and a better book. You, however, are not cynical. You are horrified to your very core. You believe in God. You believe in heaven and hell. And you have just watched a man of God, a priest of your own faith, attempt to use his holy office to condemn hundreds of souls to eternal torment. The soldier's pit was a necessity of war. The plague pit was a tragedy of nature. But this is an act of pure, calculated, and bottomless hatred. You're developing a very specialized and very depressing expertise in the different kinds of mass graves. The ditch is hastily filled with earth. There is no marker, no cross. It is an anonymous, unhallowed grave. designed to be forgotten. You look at the soldiers around you. Some are jeering, their faces flushed with victory and religious zeal. But many more are silent, their faces pale, their eyes avoiding the fresh scar on the earth. Future historians will debate the motivations for such atrocities. Was it pure religious hatred? Or was religion just a pretext for the brutality and plunder that are the true business of a mercenary army, watching the soldiers carry away their loot? And then watching them stand in silence as the chaplain curses the dead. You see that the two are a single, monstrous entity. That night, you cannot sleep. The chaplain's curse echoes in your mind. You have seen the face of your own side in this great war, and it is a face of terrifying, righteous cruelty. You have learned a new and terrible truth about mass graves. They are not always a necessity or a tragedy. Sometimes, they are a weapon, a tool of terror used to kill a person not just in this world, but in the minds of the killers. For all of eternity, the seed of a deep and profound doubt about the cause you serve, about the very nature of the faith you thought you understood, has been planted in your soul. The memory of the heretic's ditch, the sight of the desecrated bodies and the sound of the priest's terrible curse stays with you. It is a poison that seeps into your spirit. For the first time, you find yourself questioning the righteousness of the army you serve. You see the crucifix on the chaplain's banner not as a symbol of salvation, but as a standard for a new kind of crusade. One fought not against foreign infidels, but against fellow Christians who read from a slightly different book. The army marches on, a great, devouring beast, leaving a trail of burned farms and ravaged villages in its wake. The war has now been raging for more than a decade, and the land itself is beginning to die. The fields that should be green with new crops are barren and fallow. The farmers have either fled, been killed, or been conscripted into one of the many armies crisscrossing the German states. The war has consumed the people who feed the people. And now, a new and quieter enemy begins to stalk your army hunger. Your rations are cut. The bread is made with more filler than flour, a gritty mixture of sawdust and ground acorns. The meat is scarce. The soldiers, gaunt and hollow-eyed, become more prone to sickness. Master Elias's work in the surgeon's tent continues. But now he is treating more men for the bloody flux and malnutrition than for battle wounds. It is during this long, hungry march that your unit is sent on a foraging expedition, a desperate search for any grain or livestock that might have been overlooked. You travel for 2 days through a silent, desolate countryside. You are headed for a small, isolated village nestled deep in a forest, a place the maps say has been untouched by the main armies. You arrive at the village at midday, and you are greeted not by the fearful faces of peasants, but by an unnerving, profound silence. The village has not been burned. The houses are all standing, but there is no smoke from the chimneys. There are no children playing in the street. There is no sound of a blacksmith's hammer or a lowing cow. The only sound is the wind whistling through the empty doorways. Your captain, a hard-bitten veteran, orders his men to search the houses. You and Master Elias follow. What you find inside is a horror unlike any you have yet witnessed. The villagers are here, but they are all dead or dying. Not from violence, not from plague, but from simple, quiet starvation. Quiet? You see families in their own homes, skeletal figures lying on their beds, too weak to move. You see a mother, her body little more than a framework of bones, holding the tiny, still form of her infant child. The air is thick with the smell of despair and slow, quiet death in the center of this dying village. You see it in the small, muddy patch of ground that serves as their village green. A great, rectangular pit has been dug. It is neat and orderly, its walls straight. It is half full of the shrouded bodies of the villagers who have already perished. Master Elias, The cynical, hard-drinking surgeon who has seen every horror the war has to offer. Stops and stares at the pit. He takes off his hat, a gesture of respect you have never seen him make before. "Sweet mother of God," he whispers. "A plague pit, all you ask. Your voice hollow." "No, boy," he says. His voice softer and sadder than you have ever heard it. Worse, this is a famine grave. He explains the terrible, pragmatic logic of the scene before you. The villagers, knowing that the famine would take them all, knowing that soon there would be no one left with the strength to dig, had used the last of their collective energy to perform this one final communal act. They had dug their own grave. As the villagers die, one by one, the few remaining survivors, the ones still able to walk, carry the bodies of their neighbors and their own family members to the pit and gently, respectfully, place them inside. They are burying themselves. You stand before this monument to utter hopelessness, and you feel that this is somehow the most terrible mass grave of all. The soldier's pit was a product of the grim necessity of war. The plague pit was a tragedy of nature. The heretic's ditch was an act of hateful fury. But this is a grave born of a quiet, orderly, and complete despair. It is the grave a community digs when it has lost all hope of a future. The sight seems to break something in your cynical master. Elias, the man who calmly sawed through men's legs and watched them die of fevers without flinching, cannot bear this quiet, dignified surrender to oblivion. "Boy," he says to you, his voice thick, "my bag." You bring him his surgeon's bag. He walks to the nearest house, where a woman is dying, her breath coming in ragged gasps. He kneels beside her and administers a few drops of laudanum, his pain-killing tincture, to ease her passing. He goes to another house and uses his clean linen bandages to bind the sores on a small child's feet. He has nothing that can save them, nothing that can fight the famine. All he can offer is a small measure of comfort. A doctor's final, futile gesture of care. He commands you and the other soldiers to give what little rations you have in your own packs to the few survivors who are still able to eat. It is a useless act. You know, a single loaf of bread cannot end a famine, but it is a profoundly human act in a world that has become inhuman. As dusk begins to fall, your captain gives the order to leave. There's nothing to forage here. This village is a tomb as you walk away. You look back. You see two of the surviving villagers, a man and a woman. Their bodies skeletal. Their movements slow and weak. They are carrying a shrouded body between them. They walk slowly, painfully, towards the grate. Open pit, to add another of their own to the silent. Waiting earth, you have now witnessed the saddest of all mass graves. A grave built not by conquerors or by pestilence, but by the community itself. You have learned that the most terrible truth of all is not how people are killed, but the quiet, desperate dignity with which they can be forced to accept their own end, and to dig their own graves in a world that has completely and utterly forgotten them. The army marches away from the famine-stricken village, leaving the quiet horror of the self-dug grave behind. You move through the ravaged heartland of Germany, a landscape of burned villages and fallow fields. The war grinds on, but your great mercenary army finally halts. Taking up a strategic position to lay siege to a well-defended Protestant city, this will be a long siege. The commander orders a great, fortified camp to be built, a semi-permanent city of earthworks and timber. As an experienced digger, you are conscripted into the labor force, tasked with helping to excavate the massive defensive ditch that will surround the camp. It is hard, mindless work, a welcome respite from the more emotionally taxing work of your trade. You are just a laborer again, moving dirt. One morning, as your crew is digging in a large, flat field chosen for the main rampart, your shovel strikes something that is not earth and not stone. It is a bone. a human femur, dark with age. Then another man's shovel turns up a piece of a skull. And another. A rib cage. The digging stops. The men, superstitious as all soldiers are, refuse to work further. They believe they have stumbled upon unhallowed ground. You and Master Elias are summoned by the captain of the work detail to give your expert opinion. You jump down into the half-dug trench. The earth here is different. It is darker, softer, and filled with a horrifying, dense web of human bones. They are tangled, jumbled, and clearly ancient. The bones brittle and stained to the color of dark soil. This is not a single, orderly grave. This is a great, chaotic mass of the dead. You are digging a ditch to protect you from your current enemies, and you accidentally dig up a mass grave full of someone else's ancient enemies. It's a sobering reminder that you're not the first army to have a very bad day in this particular field. Master Elias examines the bones with a practiced eye. He picks up a skull. Noting the way the teeth are worn down, he examines a piece of ancient, corroded bronze that came up with a shovelful of dirt, the buckle of a belt from a forgotten age. This is not our work, he says, his voice filled with a strange kind of reverence. These bones are old, centuries old. This is not from this war, or even our fathers' wars. We are digging through a battle from the time before the chronicles were written. You have unearthed an ancient mass grave, a forgotten soldier's pit. The discovery causes a great stir in the camp. The commander, a nobleman with an antiquarian interest, comes to see the site. He is fascinated by the bronze artifacts but annoyed by the delay to his fortifications. He orders you and Elias to oversee the clearing of the old bones so the work can continue. And so you begin your strangest task yet. You become a gravedigger for ghosts. You carefully excavate the ancient remains, separating the bones from the earth. As you work, you begin to piece together the story of this long-forgotten tragedy. You find the skeletons of men, but also of women and children. You find skulls with the clear, terrible marks of blunt force trauma. This was no battle, Elias says grimly as he examines a child's small skull with a crack running through it. This was a slaughter. A village, perhaps, that was wiped out in some forgotten war. Future archaeologists and historians will debate the meaning of such sites. Can you distinguish a battle from a massacre? A plague from an atrocity? You, a simple surgeon's apprentice, are asking yourself the same questions. The bones do not tell their full story. All you know is that here, long ago, a great and terrible sorrow took place. A sorrow so complete that it was utterly erased from human memory. Until your own shovel brought it back into the light, the soldiers of your own army are terrified. They believe the ground is cursed, that by disturbing these ancient, unquiet spirits, a great misfortune will befall your army. Their fear is so great that the commander must agree to a compromise. The fortifications will be built, but the ancient bones will be treated with a measure of respect. As you place the last of the ancient skulls in the new pit, you are struck by a profound and chilling thought. The heretic's ditch you helped fill, the plague pit in the city, the soldier's pit from your great battle in a few hundred years. They will be nothing more than this. A confused jumble of bones in the earth, their stories forgotten, their tragedies erased. Someone in a distant future might dig them up by accident and wonder, for a moment, what great sorrow happened here before moving on? You realize that the ground beneath your feet, this entire war-torn land of Germany, is not just dirt and rock. It is a great, layered library of human misery, a history written in bone. You are not just marching over a landscape, you are marching over a single, vast, and ancient mass grave, and your own work is simply to add another, newer layer to it. The revelation leaves you feeling a new and deeper kind of despair, a despair that is no longer personal, but historical, timeless. The terrible truth of mass graves, you understand, is not just that they contain the dead, but that they contain the forgotten. and you now know that you are standing on a world made of them. The siege of the Protestant city continues through the long, grueling months. Your army, a great beast, lies coiled around the city walls, slowly starving it out. But the beast is also starving itself. The camp is rife with hunger, disease, and a deep, simmering boredom that occasionally erupts into violence. The soldiers have not been paid in months. Their loyalty, which was never to a king or a country, but only to the promise of coin, is wearing thin.